The halls of the Osman Palace in Constantinople echoed with whispers that spring of 1892. Rumors traveled like quicksilver through the gilded corridors. The Sultan had commissioned portraits of eligible noble women. Beneath the surface of this seemingly mundane royal tradition lay a greater purpose. Abdul Hamid II was seeking a new imperial consort. Felicity Garland watched with trepidation as her father paced their drawing room, his diplomatic pouch still unsealed on the mahogany side table. The British Embassy's quarters felt stifling despite the cool breeze from the Bosphorus slipping through open windows. "It's quite an honor," Ambassador William Garland said, his voice carrying the practiced neutrality of a career diplomat. The Sultan specifically requested families of diplomatic standing submit portraits. "It strengthens relations between our nations." Felicity's fingers traced the spine of her book absently. "Father, I'm not a trading commodity to strengthen England's position in the Ottoman court." Ambassador Garland sighed. "My dear, this is how the world works. The portrait is merely formality. Nothing will likely come of it. But refusing would be seen as a grave insult." 2 days later, Felicity sat rigid in the embassy sunroom while Leonard Quimby adjusted his easel. He was a talented young artist from London, temporarily attached to the embassy for documenting archaeological finds. Now tasked with a far more delicate commission. "Please try to relax, Miss Garland," Leonard said, his keen eyes studying her face. "Your tension will translate to canvas." "I find it difficult to appear serene when being packaged for a sultan's consideration," she replied, though she did lower her shoulders slightly. Leonard's brushstrokes were confident as he worked. "I understand your discomfort. Yet there's something powerful in a portrait. It captures more than likeness, it reveals truth about the subject." "What truth could possibly matter in this arrangement?" "The Sultan seeks beauty and connection to British influence, nothing more." Leonard stepped back, considering his composition. "You underestimate the potency of genuine character captured in oils, Miss Garland. Your intelligence, your compassion for the local orphanage you visit despite your father's concerns, your quiet defiance, these qualities shine through far more than any superficial beauty." Felicity felt heat rise to her cheeks. "You speak as though you know me well, Mr. Quimby." "I observe. It's what artists do." He selected a smaller brush. "Your kindness to the palace guards who most diplomats ignore. How you speak Turkish with the market vendors rather than expecting them to understand English. The books of philosophy hidden beneath your poetry volumes." "You've been watching me," she accused, though without true anger. "Forgive me. I find authenticity fascinating in a world of diplomatic facades." The portrait took 4 sessions to complete. On the final day, Leonard worked in silence, his concentration absolute. When he finally turned the canvas toward her, Felicity gasped. The woman looking back at her was unmistakably herself, yet somehow more. Leonard had painted her in the embassy garden with light filtering through cypress trees. Her eyes held a quiet determination, lips curved in the slightest suggestion of a smile. Most striking was how he'd captured her hands, one holding a book, the other extended slightly forward, as if offering something to the viewer. "This is how you see me," she whispered. "This is how you are," Leonard replied simply. 2 weeks passed before Ambassador Garland returned from the palace with news. The Sultan had viewed all portraits personally. Felicity's had caught his attention. "He wishes you to attend the spring reception at YLDZ Palace," her father announced, his expression unreadable. "You'll be presented formally." Felicity felt her world tilt. "And if I refuse?" "You cannot. The request is tantamount to a command." He softened slightly. "Felicity, remember your position. You represent England here." On the evening of the reception, the palace gleamed like a jewel against the darkening sky. Felicity was escorted through corridors of breathtaking opulence, walls inlaid with mother-of-pearl, ceilings adorned with intricate calligraphy, fountains that seemed to whisper secrets in their gentle splashing. The women's receiving room was filled with daughters of diplomats and Ottoman nobility. Felicity noted how they all seemed to share a certain look, practiced poise, careful expressions revealing nothing. She suddenly understood why her portrait might have stood out. When finally presented to the Sultan, she kept her eyes appropriately lowered, but not before catching a glimpse of a man perhaps 20 years her senior, with intelligent eyes and a beard touched with grey. He spoke to her briefly in formal French, asking about her impressions of Constantinople. She answered honestly, mentioning the beauty of the architecture but also her admiration for the resilience of ordinary citizens. Later, the Grand Vizier approached her father. His Imperial Majesty was most impressed with your daughter's portrait and now with her person. He wishes to extend an invitation for her to join the court as an honored guest for the summer months, to learn Ottoman customs. That night, in the privacy of their carriage, Felicity confronted her father. This is the beginning of negotiations, isn't it? For me to become part of the Imperial harem. Ambassador Garland looked pained. Felicity, understand the complexity. The Sultan doesn't take wives as his predecessors did. The consorts hold significant political influence. You would have status, security. I would have a gilded cage. You would have power to help others in ways you cannot now. He took her hands. You could continue your charitable work with his blessing and treasury. Think of the good you might do. Felicity turned to watch Constantinople pass by their carriage window. And my happiness counts for nothing in this equation? Happiness is a luxury few can afford, my dear. Especially women. 2 days later, a messenger arrived at the embassy with an ornate box. Inside lay a jeweled hairpin, the Sultan's first gift. Tradition dictated acceptance meant Felicity would be considered for the position of Imperial consort, while rejection would end further communication. As she stared at the glittering sapphires, a second messenger arrived with a different package, a letter addressed to her personally, accompanied by a small sketch. The sketch showed the orphanage she frequently visited, but reimagined with expanded buildings and gardens. The letter, written in elegant script, was from the Sultan himself. Miss Garland, your portrait revealed a spirit unlike others presented to me, one of compassion and intelligence rather than mere ambition. I propose an arrangement beyond traditional expectations. As my consort, you would maintain your faith, have freedom to pursue your charitable works with full imperial support, and serve as a bridge between our cultures. The enclosed sketch represents possibilities for the orphanage you visit. Similar institutions could be established throughout the empire with your guidance. Consider carefully. Your acceptance of the hairpin need not mean surrender of your principles, but rather expansion of your ability to enact them. Abdul Hamid II. Felicity sat stunned, the letter trembling in her hands. The offer was unexpected, appealing to her deepest desires rather than to vanity. Still, the golden bars of the cage would remain, no matter how spacious. That evening, she requested Leonard visit the embassy. When he arrived, she showed him the Sultan's letter. He saw what you captured in the portrait, she said quietly. You've made this happen. Leonard studied the letter, his expression grave. I painted what I saw. Nothing more. Did you know this would be the consequence? I knew your portrait would stand out among the practiced poses and empty smiles. He hesitated. What will you do? Felicity moved to the window, watching the lights of ships on the Bosphorus. I don't know. The Sultan offers me purpose, influence to help those who need it most. Yet the cost is my freedom. Is it truly freedom you have now? Leonard asked. As a diplomat's daughter, your path is already constrained by duty and expectation. She turned to face him. Why does it feel as though you're encouraging me to accept? Pain flashed across his features. I encourage you to see all sides clearly. As an artist, I've learned that sometimes constraints produce the most beautiful work. His voice softened. Whatever you decide, make it your choice, not your father's, not mine, not even for those children you wish to help. Choose what will allow you to recognize yourself in the mirror each morning. After a sleepless night, Felicity made her decision. She would accept the hairpin but with conditions of her own. She penned a careful letter requesting a private audience before any formal arrangement proceeded. The Sultan granted her request. 3 days later, she was escorted to a small pavilion in the palace gardens where Abdul Hamid waited without his usual entourage, a significant concession that did not escape her notice. Your Imperial Majesty, she began after the formalities, I am honored by your interest and thoughtful consideration of my passions. Before I accept your generous offer, I must speak plainly. The Sultan gestured for her to continue, his expression curious rather than offended. I cannot simply disappear into palace life as though my former self never existed. I require certain freedoms, to continue my studies, to correspond with my family, to maintain some connection to my heritage while embracing yours. Abdul Hamid studied her. You negotiate terms as though this were a diplomatic treaty, Miss Garland. Is it not? She countered. We would be forming an alliance of sorts. Unexpectedly, he smiled. Your portrait suggested boldness beneath propriety. I see it was accurate. He paced near the pavilion's edge. Your conditions are reasonable. What else? I wish to establish not just orphanages but schools for girls throughout the empire. Education changes destinies. The conservatives at court will resist. Then we shall proceed gradually, proving the benefit with each success. The Sultan's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. You say we as though you already envision us as partners in this endeavor. Felicity felt her cheeks warm. I speak hypothetically, Your Majesty. And what of love, Miss Garland? You make no mention of it in your conditions. The question caught her unprepared. I believed this arrangement to be primarily political. Perhaps initially. But I have no interest in a consort who views her position solely as duty. Respect must exist between us, with the possibility for deeper affection to grow. He stepped closer. Could you envision such a future, or would your heart remain forever with your homeland? Felicity thought of England, distant, familiar, safe. Then she considered Constantinople with its minarets piercing the sky, its streets humming with languages from across the world, its desperate needs and untapped potential. I believe hearts are more adaptable than we give them credit for, Your Majesty. Mine could find home here, given time and freedom to do so honestly. The Sultan nodded, seemingly satisfied. Then we have the beginning of an understanding. Summer arrived with Felicity's formal introduction to palace life. She maintained residence in a pavilion near the main harem quarters but separate, her negotiated compromise. The Sultan visited her regularly for conversations that ranged from literature to politics, revealing a man far more complex than his public persona suggested. In those early months, Leonard continued his work at the embassy, though Felicity saw him rarely. On the few occasions their paths crossed at diplomatic functions, their interactions remained formally polite, yet charged with unspoken sentiment. During one such event, they found themselves momentarily alone in the embassy's art gallery. You appear well, Leonard said, his eyes taking in her Ottoman-influence gown of deep blue silk. Palace life agrees with you. It is an adjustment, she replied. The Sultan has been true to his word regarding my projects. We've begun renovations on 3 orphanages already. Leonard nodded. I've heard. Your name is spoken with increasing respect in the city. And your work? I understand you've been commissioned to paint several other diplomatic families. Yes. He smiled faintly. Though none of my subjects have been quite as consequential as you. An uncomfortable silence fell between them. Felicity found herself studying a painting of the Bosphorus rather than meeting his eyes. I sometimes wonder, Leonard finally said, his voice barely audible, if I had never painted your portrait. The sentence hung unfinished as Ambassador Garland entered the gallery. Ah, Felicity. The French ambassador is asking after you. Leonard, good evening. I trust the new commission for the embassy dining hall progresses well. Yes, sir. I should return to it now, actually. Leonard bowed slightly to Felicity. Miss Garland. As autumn approached, Felicity received unexpected news. The Sultan wished her to accompany him to Bursa for the opening of a new Imperial Academy. It would be her first public appearance at his side, a clear signal of her rising status. The journey by Imperial yacht across the Sea of Marmara gave them unprecedented private time together. Standing on deck watching Constantinople recede in the distance, Felicity felt the Sultan's presence beside her. You're quiet today, he observed. I'm contemplating transitions, Your Majesty. How quickly life can change direction. He nodded. Do you regret the path that brought you here? She considered his question carefully. No. I've accomplished more in these months than I could have in years otherwise. The children at the Uscuda orphanage now have proper beds, education, hope. Yet something troubles you still. Felicity turned to face him directly. May I speak candidly? I prefer it. I wonder about your motivations, Your Majesty. Why me? There were dozens of portraits, many women of greater political advantage. What truly caught your eye? Abdul Hamid was silent for a moment, gazing toward the horizon. My position affords me everything except honesty. In your portrait, I saw someone who might speak truth even when uncomfortable. Someone who looked beyond the title to the man. He turned to her. Was I mistaken? No, she said softly. You were not mistaken. That evening, as they dined privately in the yacht salon, Abdul Hamid presented her with a book of Ottoman poetry, translated into English. I've marked passages I thought might interest you, he said. Later in her cabin, Felicity discovered folded within the pages a document bearing the Imperial seal, official authorization for not 3 but 12 schools for girls across the empire, with guaranteed funding for 20 years. In Bursa, Felicity stood beside the Sultan as he addressed the gathered dignitaries. Afterward, at the reception, she overheard 2 Ottoman officials speaking in Turkish, unaware of her comprehension. She has more influence than all his other consorts combined, one muttered. The English rose has thorns that have pierced deeply into our Sultan's considerations. It cannot last, the other replied. The court will not tolerate a foreign woman wielding such power. Someone will act to remove her. Felicity maintained her composed expression, but her mind raced. She had enemies she couldn't identify, threats she couldn't see. That night, she wrote 2 letters, one to her father, the other to Leonard. The latter she hesitated over repeatedly before finally sealing. Upon their return to Constantinople, a palace servant loyal to Felicity warned her that several high-ranking harem women and court officials had been meeting secretly. She increased her caution, accepting no food or drink that wasn't prepared under trusted supervision. The Sultan, observing her anxiety, assigned his personal guard to her pavilion. You've become too valuable to lose, he told her, his hand covering hers briefly. The touch was warm, almost tender, sending an unexpected flutter through her chest. As winter descended on Constantinople, bringing rain and cold winds from the Black Sea, Felicity fell ill with fever. Palace physicians attended her constantly, but her condition worsened. The Sultan visited daily, his concern evident in the lines deepening around his eyes. During her illness, delirious with fever, Felicity spoke of England, of her childhood, and sometimes of Leonard. In lucid moments, she would find the Sultan sitting beside her bed, reading reports or simply watching her with an unreadable expression. You called for him again, he said during one such moment. This artist who captured you so well. Shame flooded her weakened body. Your Majesty, fever dreams. He raised a hand. I am not a young man blinded by jealousy, Felicity. I understand the heart's complexities. He studied her face. Did you love him? Her throat tightened. I never permitted myself to discover the answer to that question. Abdul Hamid nodded slowly. And now? Now I have come to care deeply for you, she whispered. Not just for what you can provide or protect, but for the man behind the title. Is that not enough? Perhaps it should be. He touched her forehead gently. Rest now. We will speak more when you're stronger. But as her fever finally broke, a different crisis emerged. Evidence suggested her illness was not natural but poison administered gradually over weeks. The investigation pointed to a conspiracy involving 3 palace officials and a senior wife who resented Felicity's influence. The Sultan's rage was cold and methodical. The conspirators were arrested quietly and removed from court. No public scandal, no executions, just swift, silent elimination of threats. His message to the court was clear: Felicity stood under his absolute protection. As spring returned to Constantinople, Felicity received unexpected news from England. Her father was being recalled to London. More shocking was the second part of his letter. Leonard Quimby had accepted a prestigious position with the Royal Academy and would be departing Turkey within the month. The night before her father's departure, Felicity visited the embassy for a private farewell. After dinner, Ambassador Garland handed her a small package. "From Leonard," he explained. "He asked me to give you this personally." Alone in her chambers, Felicity unwrapped the package with trembling fingers. Inside was a miniature portrait, herself as she looked now, in Ottoman court dress, but with the embassy gardens visible through a window behind her. A note accompanied it: "Felicity, 2 worlds, 1 heart. I painted this from memory to remind you that you need not abandon one life to embrace another. You have created something extraordinary from circumstances others would find imprisoning. I leave for England with no regret save one, that I never spoke certain truths when time permitted. Perhaps it's better this way. You have found purpose and, I hope, happiness. The Sultan saw in your portrait what I already knew, that rare quality of grace under constraint, compassion paired with strength. He was wise enough to recognize what I was foolish enough to leave unspoken. Be well. Be yourself, always." Leonard tears blurred her vision as she placed the miniature in her desk drawer. The next morning, she requested an audience with the Sultan. When admitted to his private study, she found him reviewing documents, glasses perched on his nose, a vulnerable, human moment rarely witnessed by others. "Your Majesty," she began formally, then softened. "Abdul." He looked up, surprised at her use of his name. "You seem troubled, Felicity." "Not troubled. Resolved." She took a deep breath. "It has been nearly a year since my portrait first caught your attention. In that time, I have grown to respect and admire you. You've honored every promise made, supported my work beyond expectation." The Sultan removed his glasses, giving her his full attention. "Yet I sense there is more you wish to say. I have lived between worlds this past year, not fully part of the court, not fully separate from my former life." She stepped closer to his desk. "I wish to end this uncertainty. If you still desire it, I would formally accept the position of Imperial consort, with all its responsibilities and privileges." Abdul Hamid studied her face. "What has prompted this decision now?" "Understanding that one need not abandon the past to embrace the future. That hearts, as I once told you, are adaptable." She met his gaze directly. "And recognition that what began as political arrangement has become something more meaningful, at least for me." The Sultan rose slowly and came around his desk. Taking her hands in his, he spoke softly. "When your portrait first caught my eye, Felicity Garland, I saw possibility. Now I see certainty." He brought her fingers to his lips briefly. "Yes, I still desire this union. More than before, knowing the woman beyond the portrait." 3 weeks later, Constantinople celebrated the formal installation of Felicity as Imperial consort. The ceremony blended Ottoman traditions with subtle elements honoring her British heritage. As she walked the length of the palace's ceremonial hall, past bowing courtiers and officials who once plotted against her, Felicity felt an unexpected sense of homecoming. That evening, in the privacy of the Imperial gardens, Abdul Hamid presented her with a gift, a new portrait, commissioned without her knowledge. The artist had captured her standing between 2 worlds, behind her the minarets of Constantinople, before her a group of children from different backgrounds, looking up at her with hope. "This is how I see you," the Sultan said, echoing words spoken a year earlier by another artist. "This is how you are." Felicity studied the painting, then looked at the man beside her, complicated, powerful, yet increasingly dear to her heart. "When my portrait first caught your eye," she said softly, "I never expected to find myself here. To find this." "And what is this, precisely?" he asked, his voice carrying rare vulnerability. She smiled, taking his hand in hers. "The beginning of our true story, written by our own choices rather than circumstance. A love born not from fairy tales, but from respect grown slowly into something deeper. Abdul Hamid's expression softened as he drew her closer. "Then let us write it well, my Felicity." Against the backdrop of ancient Constantinople, as the evening call to prayer echoed across the city, they sealed their agreement with a kiss, two people who had found each other across boundaries of culture, expectation, and circumstance, creating something neither had imagined possible when a portrait first caught an emperor's eye.